Okay, now everyone has to be on their best behavior. That's a note to self more than anything. Welcome, Ash. Let's see, Scott, Benjamin. Got a few people from my team. Hi, Megan. Hi, Jane. All right, 60 more seconds. I feel like I should be doing a da 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 da. Actually, what I should play, connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not connected, but this morning I posted this amazing thing from Wiz. So they did a series of YouTube videos that are like mind space, kind of meditative. And I posted the one today, and they're like, ignore all past breaches. It's super fun, so take a look at that. All right, I'm going to get this bad boy going. So pardon me while I fumble with the controls a little bit. So let's see. There we go. I'm all laid out. So I'm Kathy. If we don't already know each other, very nice to meet you. I'm the VP of Operations for Rhythmic Technologies. We are an AWS consultant out of the Northern Virginia area, although I'm born, raised Cleveland, still in Cleveland. And I've got Simon, Chris, and Brian. I'll introduce them a little bit further today. They're our speakers today. If you're new, and likely you are, because it looks like we have a lot of new attendees today, I do try to mix up the speakers. I like having like a practitioner, maybe somebody from AWS or from a partner. Everyone sort of brings a little bit different perspectives. So excited to have that kind of diversity on the panel today. So a few little housekeeping items. If you would put your questions in either chat or Q&A, if we get to a point where I feel pretty good that we don't have Zoom bombers, then I'll probably just have you raise your hand and come off of mute. Contact information will be given at the end. There will be QR codes for all of us that are speaking today. So, sorry, I got to admit somebody. You'll be able to connect up with all of us. If you are a Zoom bomber and you're on this call, you're dealing with techies, you will be dealt with, and it will be unpleasant for you. So you might want to skedaddle now. All right, so our speakers today, I already introduced myself. If you're from Cleveland, you could appreciate the frustrated Cleveland sports fan part of that. I ramble on LinkedIn a lot about cloud and marketing things, so like I said, please connect. I've got Chris with us. He is a CTO and CISO for a healthcare company. Simon is a security consultant, and Brian leads the, I have to say it properly, Fasten group.
Thank you.
And works for Kalen, who's a great AWS partner. I actually used to work for them myself, and is super involved in the community. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to, oh boy, I'm losing my mind, to Simon. All yours, Simon, so tell me when to advance the slides.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Well, first, just want to say really appreciate everyone being on, and it's really looking forward to doing this talk. So I'm going to be speaking today about three AWS security services that I think people tend to mistake them for one another, because it can be easy to do. So in the world of cybersecurity, organizations are constantly searching for effective threat detection and analysis tools to protect their digital assets. AWS in particular provides three services to address this need, and they are GuardDuty, SecurityHub, and Amazon Detective. And like I just kind of said, although these services offer unique features and capabilities that aid in identifying and responding to potential security threats, it can be very easy to confuse one for the other. So we're going to do kind of a high level comparison of all three and how they work together. Next slide, please. So let's start with GuardDuty. So what is GuardDuty? So Amazon GuardDuty is a threat detection service that continuously monitors for malicious activity and unauthorized behavior access. across an entire AWS environment. It combines machine learning, anomaly detection, and malicious file discovery using both AWS and third-party sources to help protect accounts, workloads, and data. It's capable of analyzing tens of billions of events across multiple data sources, including CloudTrail logs, VPC flow logs, DNS query logs, S3 data events, EKS, ECS, and EC2. So at its core, GuardDuty essentially is a continuous monitoring system. So it's an IDS. So I remember, when I was a kid, my father used to always use Norton antivirus and McAfee. So on my laptop. So imagine that capability, but in a cloud environment. So it detects something suspicious, generates an alert, and lets you know about it. So pretty standard, and it's for your entire environment. So GuardDuty utilizes intelligent threat discovery. So when I say threat intelligence, I mean the process of identifying and analyzing cyber threats. So, think about tools like CrowdStrike, Kaspersky, ZeroFox, Bitdefender. One of the cool things about GuardDuty is that it's very easy to enable it. So it's literally one click. So, I mean, anyone on this call, you could go into your AWS environment today after this webinar and enable GuardDuty for your entire infrastructure. So it's very easy to enable. And you even get another cool feature is there's a 30-day free trial. So when I talk about, and I'm going to get to an architectural design in the next slide, not yet, but in the next slide. So you'll kind of see this architected out. But when I say input data, what do I mean by that? So it could be CloudTrail event log. So let's kind of walk through like what would GuardDuty be looking for. So for example, let's say you have unusual API calls or unauthorized deployments. That's what it would analyze in CloudTrail event logs. From CloudTrail management events, that would be someone creating a VPC subnet or creating a trail event, et cetera. When I say, S3 data events, that could be, get objects, list objects, delete objects, et cetera. VPC flow logs, what would GuardDuty be looking for? So that could be looking for unusual internal traffic or unusual IP addresses as well. And then for a Kubernetes audit log, that could be finding suspicious activities on an EKS cluster. Another cool thing about GuardDuty is that I put kryptonite to cryptocurrency attacks. And the reason why I said that is because GuardDuty is particularly effective against cryptocurrency attacks because AWS actually created a dedicated finding for cryptocurrency attacks. So that's another benefit. And we'll see this with the other services as well. But GuardDuty can be used in tandem with Amazon EventBridge and Lambda and SNS. So for any people that don't know what EventBridge is, EventBridge used to be called CloudWatch Events. Now it's EventBridge, and it essentially allows you to connect and automate your applications and services. So for example, I don't know, let's say you have a web application that generates log data and you want to store this log data in S3 for analysis. With EventBridge, you could create an event rule, which would automatically trigger a Lambda function to process the log data and store it in S3 whenever a new event is received. So we can go to the next slide, and I kind of have an architecture. So this kind of explains in an architectural form. So you have VPC flow logs, CloudTrail logs, DNS logs, EKS audit logs. GuardDuty is monitoring your entire AWS infrastructure. It analyzes those logs, and then based on that analysis, it pushes it to EventBridge, which EventBridge can then create an event to push it to SNS. So SNS is like push notification. So essentially what we're getting at here is GuardDuty really allows your security team to be more efficient and better respond to potential security threats quickly and efficiently. So very, very helpful. And so what I have here, I just wanted to kind of go through, this is kind of go through how GuardDuty is enabled, et cetera. So this is the welcome screen, and you can see where I mentioned having a 30-day free trial. You can see we're going to see how easy it is to enable GuardDuty. So we want to click get started. So let me touch on service role. So the service role permission is essentially where you give GuardDuty permission to act on your behalf in your AWS environment. So it's no different than any other service. You need to enable roles. So I would have then clicked enable GuardDuty. So we can go to the next slide. And this is the summary screen for GuardDuty. So there's no findings right now. So I just kind of wanted to show this initially. I also want to show, if we go to the next slide, trusted IP. So here, if I wanted to whitelist an IP address for secure communication with my AWS environment, I could do that here. And if I also wanted to specifically have malicious IPs that I know are malicious, I could have them in my threat IP list. So we can go to the next slide. And so member accounts, so this is cool as well. So GuardDuty, like I said, is for your entire AWS infrastructure. So, let's say you have multiple accounts, you can then specify. So in the case of this would be my master account. You can then specify which account will be your master account. You could then, if you wanted to, send an invitation to your member accounts, and that would then allow you to, GuardDuty would kind of serve as your sort of your repository for your findings for GuardDuty. So it's pretty cool. Now, AWS does recommend, they recommend that you use AWS organizations. So you'll see to the right there, it says GuardDuty supports organizations. AWS recommends that, but you are also able to send invitations through your master account outside of organizations. So I just wanted to kind of show that. Next slide, please. So what I did was I wanted to simulate a threat detection environment, because remember, like I said, GuardDuty is continuous monitoring. So what I did was you can generate sample findings because this is like a sandbox account. So I did that. So we want to go to the next slide. Well, you can see it. You want to go back, Kathy, if you don't mind?
It is actually exceedingly difficult to go back.
Oh, okay. No worries. So I kind of went a little too fast. I wanted to show you, I hope everyone was able to see the generate sample findings. And so anyway, when you do generate sample findings, this is how, so if you remember how the summary screen looked before, and now this is it with sample findings that GuardDuty has detected. So on the left, you can see it ranks your findings by severity, so low, medium, high. On the right, in that pie chart, it'll also show you the most common types of findings that have been found. So, and then also, if you look at the bottom where it says resource with most findings, so that EC2 instance, obviously, that's not a real instance, but we're going to reference that throughout this presentation. So I just want you to remember that. So the I9999. So if we want to go to the next slide. So this is the findings screen. So again, if you remember that EC2 instance that I referenced before, it has findings here. So we can go to the next slide. And so what I did was I wanted to focus on one finding in particular. So this is a denial of service. So I'll read it out. So it says the EC2 instance I9999 is behaving in a manner that may indicate it is being used to perform a denial of service attack using the UDP protocol. So this is really helpful, for a security team, because on one hand, this could be a false positive, or it could be an actually malicious. And as a security team, GuardDuty would enable us to take effective action. So we could say, okay, well, maybe we need to enable AWS Shield, right? AWS Shield is perfect for DDoS attacks. Or maybe we need to enable a WAF and combine that with CloudFront to mitigate against this attack. So the findings, again, and I want you to think back to the days when you use Norton antivirus and McAfee. There are times where you do get where you'll get an alert and it is a false positive, but it's important, I think, for a security team to always be vigilant, and GuardDuty enables us to do that. Now, I also want to touch on something else. You'll see where it says investigate with detective. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that I really want people to take away from this is that these three services, although they are confused for each other, they are separate, but they do intertwine and work together. And so detective, and I'm going to get to this later on, but detective is root cause analysis, is a root cause analysis service. And so if I wanted to really dig deep into this potential denial of service attack, I could with Amazon Detective. And GuardDuty is integrated with Detective to enable us to do that very quickly. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So Now I'm going to go to SecurityHub. So what is AWS SecurityHub? So SecurityHub is a central security tool to manage security across several AWS accounts and automate security checks. Essentially, what SecurityHub does, it allows us to centralize our security findings into one place so that a security team can be much more organized and take action based on security alerts. So when I say security findings, I'm talking about security findings for all your security, so all AWS security services. So I'm not just talking about a GuardDuty. That could be Macie, that could be IAM Access Analyzer, uh, any security service that AWS offers. SecurityHub it allows us to see all those findings in one place for all of our accounts. So again, like I put on the third bullet point, the automated aggregated alerts are for various services like config, GuardDuty, inspector, Macie, IAM, Access Analyzer, Systems Manager, Firewall Manager, AWS Health, and AWS Partner Network Solutions. And one thing I do want to note is that to enable SecurityHub, you do have to have AWS config enabled first. So what is config? Config basically is a service that lets you assess and audit and evaluate the configurations for your AWS resources and environment. So I'm going to show you guys some architecture here. So this first one it really breaks down what I was just saying about at the top of the architecture, you see multi-accounts. We then see Macie, GuardDuty, Inspector, Firewall Manager, Access Analyzer, Systems Manager. So all those findings for all those multiple accounts, all those findings are then collected into SecurityHub. SecurityHub then has the ability to generate an event bridge event to then initiate push notifications to our security team. It also has the ability to do further investigation with detectives. So again, you remember what I was saying about how all these services, although they're different, they intertwine. As we can do further investigation with GuardDuty, we can also do that with SecurityHub. Now, I want to quickly touch on the second bullet point here about automated checks for SecurityHub findings. SecurityHub at its core really is a CSPM tool. And for anyone that doesn't know what CSPM stands for, that's Cloud Security Posture Management. Essentially, Cloud Security Posture Management allows us to detect and prevent misconfigurations and threats that lead to sensitive data breaches and compliance violations. So the point I'm trying to make is SecurityHub also has a compliance component to it. So for I don't know if anyone on this call has used any compliance tools before, but like a very well-known one is Trend Micro's conformity, which essentially you get a compliance framework, and then conformity will scan your entire infrastructure and see how it matches up against those specific controls and will assign you a score. And so SecurityHub has that same use Orca. Awesome. Because SecurityHub has that same capability. So SecurityHub, and we'll see this in the slides to come, SecurityHub does allow us to do compliance checks against AWS best practices, and I'll show you that in a second. One more thing you may also notice, you may be saying to yourself, well, it sounds like SecurityHub and GuardDuty sort of have the same capability in the fact that we're gathering findings, and then we're then able to generate an event bridge event and then enable SNS to notify our security team. And that's, I think, where people get a little bit confused with GuardDuty and SecurityHub. And I was trying to find a really good analogy to kind of say how they're similar, but how they're different. And I found a great one that I found is basically related to government. So if you think about it, the president of the United States and the governor of a state, those are two separate jobs and two separate functions, but they do sort of the same thing, but they're still separate, and they do intertwine at points, but they are separate functions. And SecurityHub and GuardDuty are very much like that. So it's about GuardDuty is continuous monitoring. SecurityHub is a repository for all of our findings that GuardDuty and other security services will find. SecurityHub is that repository, but both of them have the same capability of allowing our security team to allowing our security team to take action on malicious threats as quickly as possible. And so in that same regard, you don't have to use GuardDuty with SecurityHub, and you don't have to use SecurityHub with GuardDuty, or you can use them both together to be even more efficient. So
Hey,
next,
Simon, can I
yeah.
ask you a quick question on that? So would Security Hub then be helpful for audit and compliance?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And will that's a great question, Kathy. And um, I like to think of SecurityHub first as a repository tool for all of the security findings in AWS, but secondly, and maybe even more importantly, as a compliance check tool. And we'll see that actually in one of the next slides. So if you next slide. So I just wanted to, this is another architecture design. I know it says Amazon CloudWatch there, but remember CloudWatch events is no longer, it's now EventBridge, but I just wanted to again show the notification piece that SecurityHub does, like GuardDuty. So you can see all those services feed into SecurityHub, and then yeah, thank you. So
Oh, sorry.
no, you're fine. So again, this is my AWS environment, and so you can see again 30-day free. So anyone on this call, you can literally go and enable SecurityHub as soon as we get off this webinar. So if I would go to SecurityHub, the next slide. And so again, remember I said you have to enable AWS config. So now security standards. So if you see at the bottom there, those are the compliance standards that SecurityHub will check my AWS account for. So I check the AWS foundational security best practices and also CIS standards as well. So really, really good stuff. So we want to go to the next slide. And this will kind of show. So remember I said, look at all those, if you go to the product column, you see you have Patch Manager there, SecurityHub, obviously, GuardDuty, they would all be there. And one thing that I did want to point out was so you see where, so like one check in particular would be CloudFormation stack should be integrated with SNS. So obviously these were, what I'm trying to say is the findings that you're seeing here in SecurityHub are findings that are generated from the sample findings that I did in GuardDuty. So the point I'm trying to make is you see how GuardDuty is feeding into SecurityHub. These aren't real findings. These are the sample findings that I generated in GuardDuty from the screenshot that I showed you guys. So I just wanted to kind of make that point that SecurityHub serves as sort of the repository for all of your findings in your AWS account. Next slide, please. And again, so this is to Kathy's point, the compliance piece. So obviously my compliance scores are really high because this is a sandbox account, but normally, your compliance scores would need improvement. But I'm just trying to show the security standards that SecurityHub will check. For each control that you enable, SecurityHub would run a security check, and then a security check determines which AWS sources are in compliance with the rules that the control includes. So next slide, please. And here I just wanted to highlight again the fact that the sample findings that I generated in GuardDuty, I don't know if you guys remember, but they were 124 high findings, and you can see that at the bottom where it says findings by region. And next slide, please. And I already kind of touched on this, but like I was trying to also mention the controls that for compliance that SecurityHub checks for. So this control, actually, the one about CloudFormation stack should be integrated with SNS, that's actually an AWS best practice, right? So my account wasn't following that, and that's why it failed. Next slide. Now, before I go to GuardDuty, I also want to touch on how quickly, and I know you can't go back, but I meant to show this. What I had done was I wanted to show also in real time sort of how findings are generated. So for instance, on my account, what I did was I created a security group that was allowing SSH, SSH traffic on port 22 from anywhere, right? So that's obviously a security misconfiguration, because obviously you want to know who's SSHing into your instances. So as soon as I did that, GuardDuty flagged it, and it showed up in the SecurityHub's finding dashboard that we saw. And another one that I did was I allowed open access on one of my S3 buckets public read access, that's another potential security misconfiguration, and it showed up in the dashboard. But we've already gone past it, so I apologize. I meant to show that. But now let's get to detective. We've kind of touched on detective already, but detective is kind of what brings these two together in a way. So we have services like GuardDuty, Macy, SecurityHub. They identify potential security issues or findings, but sometimes those security findings require deeper analysis or to isolate the root cause and take action. And that's where detective comes in. So let's say you have a repeat finding. You're not sure, is this a false positive or is this really malicious? That's where detective comes in, and it allows you to analyze, investigate, and quickly identify the root cause of security issues using machine learning and graphs. So, and the final bullet point, detective automatically collects and processes events from VPC flow logs, CloudTrail, and GuardDuty to create a unified view. Detective will then provide visualizations with details and context to get to the root cause. So I have kind of a next slide, please. So in this example, so let's say you have, let's say one of your users disabled CloudTrail logging was disabled. So as soon as that happens, GuardDuty is going to generate a finding, and then you could then use detective to get to the root cause of this. So there's a triage stage. So is this a false positive, or is this a true positive? Was it a mistake that this happened, or is this someone with malicious intent? If we identify this as a true positive, then we would go into our scoping. So what systems and users were compromised? Where did the attack originate from? How long has the attack been going on? And then we would then go to our response phase, which would be stopping it. So in the case of this, it would be enabling CloudTrail logging once more. So the triage portion is utilized with obviously machine learning. And then the response piece, like I said, would be enabling CloudTrail once again. Next slide, please. And so I'm just kind of hearkening back to the GuardDuty dashboard that we saw with the findings. So again, for the denial of service, potentially malicious finding, right? We can dig deeper with detective. And next slide, please. Thank you. And so it just kind of gives you so much more information about a potentially malicious finding. Next slide. So in summary, the three services. So GuardDuty is automatic threat detection. So provides findings around malicious activity happening within your AWS account resources. So again, GuardDuty is an IDS. So when I say that, let's say you have a compromised EC2 instance that's trying to mine Bitcoin. That's where GuardDuty would come in. GuardDuty would find that and allow you then to take action as an organization. SecurityHub, at its core, is a CSPM tool. Remember, that's Cloud Security Posture Management tool. So that gives us centralized viewing for our security findings and insights and compliance control, insights to compliance controls and frameworks. So let's say we have S3 buckets that are publicly available, like the example that I gave a few minutes ago, right? Well, let's say we have IAM keys that have existed for more than 90 days. Those findings again would be generated in GuardDuty, but they would be stored collectively across all of our accounts, across all of our services in SecurityHub. Or let's say is our AWS, so this is the compliance piece. Let's say is our AWS account following AWS security best practices. So that's the compliance piece again. And then detective, like I said, is root cause analysis. So investigation in response to a finding. So again, like the denial of service finding that we saw a few minutes ago. So in a nutshell, all three tools work in harmony and together for one common goal: to better protect your AWS cloud infrastructure. And again, kind of going back to the whole government analogy, I can, if anyone wants to, I can share the link, the article that kind of did that, and it really helped me understand it a lot better. It was, the executive branch, judicial branch, legislative branch. They all have different functions, but they all work together essentially to form the government. So these three services have different functions, but all work together to better protect your cloud infrastructure. And with that, we're now going to get a deeper dive into GuardDuty from Mr. Chris Lombardi.
Simon, thank you for that. That was a really good primer and intro for everyone to see those services, which are really essential to starting your information security program. Next slide. So a little about me. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, primarily in data centers, US defense, and healthcare. Every industry I've worked in has been regulated, so security has been one of the top priorities from the ground up. Currently serve as the Chief Technology Officer and a Chief Information Security Officer for a healthcare software provider called Axiom Systems. Our software and solutions are responsible for millions of healthcare transactions per day. Every single one of those transactions, if that data was to be released, could devastate someone's life. It is of our utmost importance and our moral obligation to ensure that this data is protected. And that is why security is a really big passion of mine. One of my career highlights in security was I actually helped facilitate the first of its kind merger between two defense contractors from two different nations. The United States can sell to Russia, and the United States can sell to Italy, but Italy can sell to Russia and China. So we had to create a system that allowed us to do business with other countries and have foreign ownership, but not allow technology to make it into the wrong hands. So I worked with the Defense Security Service, which brought me down to DC, which is where I am today. I am a 12-time certified Gold Jacket recipient with Amazon, Microsoft Azure certified, and ISC2, which is cybersecurity certified. When I talk with small businesses, even enterprises, this is what I'm presented with, the perceived security. They have the 4-inch steel door, the burglary rods, the redundant locking mechanisms, the latest and greatest technology. This is how they say they secure their network. The actual security of the door looks a lot like this, and they're deadbolted it with a Cheeto. And that's not great, but you know what? You have to understand where you're at in your security journey, and then it's an iterative process. So you want to make small changes to get to where you want to be. How many of you in the chat can you have a security team that works at your organization full time? I'm curious to see that. That's great, Kathy. Excellent. There are a lot of organizations that don't. And what I'm hoping to do is show everyone a simple way today to get security started or even expand on their current security program. And to start, I want to go back to some of what Simon was saying, which was what is an intrusion detection system? GuardDuty. That's what GuardDuty is. It is an intrusion detection system at its core. It detects anomalous behaviors. It does not prevent. Think of this a lot like your Ring doorbell camera. Someone comes up to your door. They open your door because you left it unlocked. Your Ring doorbell catches it, but it's not preventing anybody from doing anything. Next slide. An intrusion prevention system, on the other hand, is what we want to work towards today. And that's what my talk is about. It's about how to take that IDS system and turn it into an IPS system, and intrusion prevention. That is a system that's going to respond to a potential threat with a predefined response. It will minimize or stop the potential threat. And it works hand in hand with your IDS system, whether that's GuardDuty or another one that maybe you purchased off the marketplace. I always lovingly say that grandmothers are the original IDS IPS system. You put your hand in the cookie jar, she detects it, she slaps it, and prevents you from ruining your dinner. Another piece of technology that Simon spoke about was EventBridge. Think of EventBridge as a router for events. So in a networking sense, you want to send a packet from point A to point B over the internet. You say, I want to go to this address. You send it to your router sends it to the target. It's the exact same feeling. It's the exact same process. It's serverless, and it connects to your application components together. Next. So I want to go over a quick use case with you. It's 3:30 in the morning, Thanksgiving Day, because let's face it, security threats never happen during business hours. Most hackers are going to target you off business hours or times where they know that you're short on staff to maximize their time in the network. GuardDuty, in this case, finds a anomalous behavior on a privileged account. It generates the finding. So it's detected. And let's say we had an SNS notification, but that doesn't really help us at 3:30 in the morning. So we want to put technology in place that's going to actually prevent this user from doing anything. Now, it could be legitimate traffic, but it may not be. Next. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a small event bridge response that is going to allow us to prevent anybody from performing malicious actions on that account. The way this architecture works is we're starting with GuardDuty, which has already been enabled. GuardDuty is going to generate the finding, which it happens automatically. That finding is sent as an event automatically to Event Bridge. And Event Bridge is looking at the event patterns and trying to match it to a rule. In our case, it's going to find a matched rule, and then that rule is going to execute a Lambda function. So the setting up of Event Bridge is actually really easy. The only thing you need to do is go to Event Bridge, and then you're going to just start and just say new rule. And you're going to be greeted with a screen like this. You don't have to put much in there. You can leave all the defaults. Just make sure that you're going to set your rule up with an event pattern. This way you're matching. You can use the scheduling option, but that's not going to help you in a security situation. This is another page where you can just keep the standard default, which is AWS events, because we're trying to capture a finding from GuardDuty. So the next page you're going to be greeted with is a sample event. It's optional. I 100% recommend doing this because it allows you to see every single attribute associated with a GuardDuty finding. Unfortunately, it's so long, there's no way I could realistically fit it onto a PowerPoint slide, but I do want to show that you can click on the AWS events sample type, you click on GuardDuty finding, and then you can see all the different options that you have. And this will help you test to make sure that your pattern is actually going to trigger when an event is fired. If the GuardDuty finding generates, you want to make sure that finding is actually going to get caught on a rule and execute the Lambda function as anticipated. You don't want to find that out in production, that it's not working. So your next step is you're going to go ahead and create a pattern. And to do that, you're just going to say use a pattern form, which is not the default option. And then on the bottom left, you're going to see event source, and that's going to be AWS services. AWS service, select GuardDuty, and the event type of GuardDuty finding. Amazon is going to go ahead and generate code for you on the right under event pattern that actually is, in my opinion, way overly permissive. Essentially what it's saying is anytime there is a GuardDuty finding from GuardDuty to execute an event, that I don't necessarily believe in one-size-fits-all solutions, so I want to go ahead and tailor this more to a specific finding type. And I'm going to do that by adding that third line where it says detail, and that's the JSON array, and the type credential access IAM user anomalous behavior. What this is going to do is it's only going to trigger the event when that finding type has been found and is matched. So this means that I can have different rules that have different Lambda functions that perform different actions. And what I'll do is I'll test the pattern against a sample we created earlier to make sure that it actually will be caught. And edit the sample according to however you need it to validate your use case. Now, there's a lot of different targets that you can use in EventBridge. You can use Kinesis streams, step functions. You can make it as simple as or complex as you want. But for this instance, I want us to use a Lambda function. And the Lambda function is something that you can create beforehand, or in my case, I created it while I was doing this. And it's a very simple Lambda using Python. So the Lambda function itself is nothing more than me using Python. It is going to pull in the username that was in the GuardDuty finding, and then I'm going to perform a lookup for all the roles and policies that are associated with that user. And then I'm going to strip all of those from the user to make sure that user has no credentials to perform any actions. And that may not be the intended, outcome that you necessarily want, but you have to determine your own risk appetite. And at 3:30 in the morning, if this behavior is happening, are you okay with somebody having access to your systems until you wake up and see the alert and act on it? So those are risk assessments that you'll have to take internally as an organization. There are some variations here. So because there is no one-size-fits-all solution, you can go ahead and look at all of the different attributes that are in that sample finding and figure out what rules work best for you. For example, maybe you have a US East 1 and US East 2 account, and the US East 2 account region is just R&D, and it's more expected. You would expect some anomalous behaviors because it's research and development. You could actually structure your event pattern so you can go ahead and say, I only want this to show, or I only want the Lambda to execute for US East 2 or US East 1. You can even go as far as saying in the Lambda function that you only want it to execute when it's off business hours. You can just wrap it with some code that says if the time is after 6 p.m. and before 8 a.m., remove the role. Otherwise, send an SNS. So you can take multiple paths.
Hey, Chris, we actually got a question to that event. Kyle, you could pull yourself off mute. Did that answer your question? Or just type it in chat?
Yeah, thank you. That was actually exactly what I was looking for. Thanks.
Awesome.
Yep,
Thank
no
you.
problem. And you would actually do that in the Lambda itself. You wouldn't rely on EventBridge for that. So here are some additional use cases that I'm not going to go ahead and go through that whole scenario again with all the screenshots, but unauthorized access EC2 Tor relay. Well, that's never a good sign, especially if you're in a regulated industry. So what I would do is I would go ahead and create a Lambda that looks up the route table associated with that EC2, and I would remove the route to the internet. I want to make sure that nothing is getting out that shouldn't. Depending on the data that's on that EC2 instance, you could even go as far as just turning it off and then go and performing forensics after that. So the next use case would be the network ports are being scanned or network port unusual, which really means there's the EC2 instance may connect on port 80 and 443, but now it's seeing traffic on, let's say, port 22. Well, that could be indicative of a problem, or it could be a user playing around with a new piece of software and isn't aware that it's doing something on the back end. So in that case, depending on the data and depending on your organization, you could create a Lambda to block the port from being used, and then go ahead and do it again if it comes up, and keep an eye on that because that may be indicative of malware. So EC2 port sweep, this is another good one and often pertains to malware. Let's say it's 2 in the morning, your EC2 instance starts suddenly scanning your network. And it's checking ports on all your servers in the VPC. That's usually not for a good reason. Most network engineers would even argue that they wouldn't even do that. So in this case, my personal recommendation would be to go ahead and create a Lambda that removes all routes, all outbound security groups, isolate the system, and then I would actually even go a step further and then programmatically using Python through the Lambda execute a GuardDuty malware scan. So by the time you actually get to the point of forensics in the morning, you already have a malware scan, you have a history, and all the logs are immutable and maintained. So there are some anti-patterns here. Let's say you have a EC2 and it's being port scanned from the outside. Well, if your site is public, that's expected. If you have something on the internet, expect that you are going to get port scanned all the time. The same thing goes with SSH brute force. Expect that there are bots out there that are going to be performing this type of attack all the time. So in those cases, there are different ways to mitigate outside of EventBridge. And that would be create a prefix list if you can't turn SSH off. Limit the activity that can happen on that port. Use web application firewall. Use rate-based rules. Those are going to just add to your layered defense strategy. And that's what you're really trying to get at, is there is no one piece of technology here that is really going to be the one and only. It's a layered defense strategy. So if an attacker gets through one layer, they hit the next, and they get through that layer, they hit the next. And hopefully you have enough layers in place to where the attack is detected and mitigated before any data is exfiltrated or data integrity is lost. And that is it. I'm going to pass it over to Brian Tarbox. Brian is an AWS ambassador, Alexa champion. He also runs the Boston AWS user group, and I had the pleasure of randomly meeting him at reInvent. Brian, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm also an AWS community hero, and I resonate with a bunch of stuff that Chris said. Yeah, we actually just discovered yesterday that that we had breakfast together at reInvent. Can't imagine why I was a little confused after 5 days of meeting 70,000 people. But anyway, so let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to be talking about S3 from a security point of view, but there's so much in S3 that people generally don't know. And there are some tips here that can save you incredible amounts of money. So I thought it would be remiss not to talk about some of these things. And there's at least one tip in here where, with a single checkbox to specify a different S3 parameter, I was able to save a company $3 million a year. So it's perhaps worth looking at that. And I also want to say I have worked in the medical space as well, and so security breaches and ransomware. These are all, having your company lose a couple $1 million, that's a really bad thing. Having the bad guys get in and cause wrong medical data can legitimately make people die. So I take this really to heart. So we're going to talk about some performance stuff, talk about versioning, which is a thing most people don't know that they don't really know. We'll talk about storage classes, including intelligent tiering, and we'll get into locks down the end. Object locks, I'll just preface it by saying that object lock is a way to put an absolute lock on your data such that it cannot be touched, even by Amazon. And there are some horror stories there, which we'll get into, because horror stories are always fun. So, okay, let's move on. Okay, so we all know that S3 isn't a file system, really, even though in the next slide we're going to talk about how Amazon just changed their mind and lets you pretend it's a file system. But it's really a bucket and key system. And there are performance considerations, and most people don't run into these performance considerations. But I've worked in medical companies where you're doing genomic data, where you're doing an enormous amount of data. And again, most people think, oh, I have big data. It's like, well, unless you've got dozens or hundreds of petabytes, you don't really have big data. So if we look at, so S3 performance is basically by key. And so if you look at the two URLs there, you know, one of them goes to, and you can tell I'm a British Premier League's, you know, football fan. Go Tottenham, come on, you Spurs. You know, and so I have URLs for stadiums and teams, and I could do reads on those separately and get, for each one of them, I could get my 3,500 puts and my 5,500 gets. So if you're, oh, yay, Jane, somebody else, and Simon, someone else who loves coys, yes. And finally, we have a team where I used to say that we supported Tottenham because we liked Payne, but now we actually have a good coach. But anyway, so it's good to pay attention to performance, and bear in mind that dates make terrible prefixes because they absolutely guarantee you have hotspots. So these are just some tips, and we'll go through these relatively quickly, but you know, I want to just toss it out for folks. So now we have mount points and Express One Zone, and S3 Express One Zone has changed its name a few times. I think this is the current name, but at the last reInvent, they were changing the names and we kept stumbling over what it actually is. But so let's start with mount points. Mount points is a system where you can, nope. Okay, nope. Okay, so, all right, well, don't advance, but I can still talk about the other two. That's okay. So mount points is a way basically to mount S3 as if it was a file system. And it's a bunch of software that will translate file system commands into S3 commands. So if you did essentially an LS on a file system, you know, it will do a get on the bucket. And so it's, you know, I guess it's similar to FX Luster, but it's, and in a certain way, it's a crutch, because not all file system commands are supported by it. But for transitioning, it's not that bad. Now, One Zone is a really different animal in the S3 space. I mean, one of the things we've all grown up with S3 is, you know, 11 nines of durability and 9 nines of availability. So your S3 files do not go away. They are not in danger. Even 5 or 6 years ago, where there was that horrible S3 meltdown, no files were lost. I mean, not a single file was lost, even though it was probably the worst day that S3 had ever had. Now you can already do some trade-offs. You can do, you can save money by having 1 zone availability for your S3, even though it's normally 3 zones. And, you know, if you're doing that, you have, you know, you're in danger of losing things. Express Zone is explicitly, you're just in 1 zone, but it's very, very fast. Imagine what's required for S3 consistency by talking to 3 availability zones. They're giving us this offer of express traffic, but with a proviso that it's just in 1 AZ. So those are some things to look at. Okay, again, don't advance. So now we'll go to versioning. So, you know, all your S3 objects have a version ID. And that version ID is null if you haven't turned on versioning. And, you know, most of us haven't turned on versioning. Now, I've heard some people say, oh, for security, turn versions on. So even if someone deletes something or corrupts it, you know, you still have the previous versions. Well, I don't find that all that comforting, because if a bad actor can get into my system and delete or manipulate an object, there's nothing really that stops them from deleting the previous version. So when I hear people say that versioning is a security measure, it's very, if it is at all, it's a very weak one. The other thing to keep in mind is that S3 objects are immutable. So if you have an unversioned object and you do a put on that object, it's not really an update, it's a complete replace. And if you're doing a put on a versioned object, you're creating a whole new object. So there's just something to keep in mind. And if you're doing a lot of versions of a thing, you can end up with quite a lot of versions. So I have an Alexa skill, and I've muted my devices. So I'm sorry if that woke anyone up. In my house, we say Amanda when we're trying to talk about the device. So I'll say I have an Amanda device that talks about British Premier League football. And so I update, my various statistics and tables. And so on. And I happened to look back and notice that I had, 600 versions of my Who's the Top Goal Scorer file. So, and that's okay, but you don't have to do that, but you should pay attention to it. Normally you always operate on the current version, but you can override it. If you're doing that, you're probably already walking into an area that you shouldn't be in. But each version does have its own storage costs and locking, and we'll get into that in a moment. So now you can advance. Okay, so just version gets the see if I can draw over here. Yeah, in the upper left, the first get is just a regular get, and you get the photo. The second one in the upper left is you're asking for a particular version. You get that version. Same thing for delete. So you can do gets, but probably unless you have a real reason for going after a previous version, I'd stay away from it. But okay, go ahead. And the same for delete. We'll just skip that one. Okay. So S3 has these various storage classes, and you can fine tune your costs based on how you're using your files. Now, the assumption is that you know how you're using your files. And you would think that that would be a safe assumption, but in my experience, it's often not a safe assumption. It's like, oh, no one's looking at these files. Okay, can we delete them? No, because someone might be looking at them. It's like, well, then you're just admitting that you don't know. S3 is such an easy place to put files, and it's so relatively inexpensive that we tend to put things in there and then don't know. But if you do know, if you do know about your data access patterns, you can take advantage of that. But if you don't know, you don't know, and that's something you might want to put that in your technical debt category. So go ahead. So there are all these storage classes, and some of the names change, but I'll say, starting from in the top row, it's standard access, infrequent access, global instant retrieval, which to me is just a nonsensical contradictory term, or sorry, Glacier instant retrieval, and then Glacier flexible retrieval, and then Glacier deep access. And there's a lot in this table, but look at the bottom row, the price. If you go to infrequent access, woohoo, I can save 50% of my cost. If I go to Glacier Instant, I can save, wow, all kinds of amounts of my cost. What just happened? I'm seeing a blank screen.
Give me a second here. I will figure this out. Sorry.
Okay, well, I can keep talking. So there's all these categories, and you can save different amounts of money on each of the categories. And the retrieval time is actually pretty good for the first three categories, not so much for the last two. So we tend to think of standard, infrequent, Glacier Instant, and then flexible archive and deep archive. And those are the ones where, you really won't be using those, and it can take hours to get them back. Okay, and I'm just going to keep riffing because it's funny. I'm part of New Voices or Community Voices, and we've done speaker training. And one of the things we talked about yesterday in our speaker training session was stuff happens, and just roll with it, man. You got to roll with it. So I'm going to do hand puppets for the diagrams. Intelligent tiering is another storage class, but it's a storage class that has categories under it. normally when you do a storage class, you explicitly say, make this file, infrequent access, make this file standard access. In intelligent tiering, the system automatically moves files around. So it's based on most recent access. So you can put a file in intelligent tiering, and it always starts at standard access. And after 30 days, it just moves itself over to infrequent access. And after another 60 days, it just moves itself over to Glacier Instant Retrieval. Now, when you set up intelligent tiering, you can say, I do or don't want to use those other two categories. And generally, we say not to. So you might be asking yourself, and you'd be more likely to be asking yourself if I had the slide, but you might be asking yourself, so what's the difference between intelligent tiering and regular? And this is where horror stories come in. So I worked at a medical company that had hundreds of petabytes of data, and someone said, let's put it all into infrequent access, and woohoo, we can save half the cost, which is great until the FDA says, hey, you know that data you used for that trial, we want you to rerun the experiment. And we had to pull hundreds of petabytes from infrequent access back to storage. And that cost, I think it ended up costing millions, at least hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it took weeks to do. Intelligent tiered infrequent access does not have a retrieval charge. So that's the difference. If you go to infrequent access and then you do access the file, you pay a retrieval charge, unless it's in intelligent tiered infrequent access. So I think intelligent tiering should be the default for everything, because if your file is used a lot, it's just going to stay in standard access. And if it gets used periodically, it moves, it moves down. And again, we can't see the slide, but the retrieval time for standard, infrequent, and Glacier Instant is basically identical. We've actually done some studies because I was at this company and no one believed that this could be the case. People said, Brian, how can it be that you can get, only pay 17% of the cost of standard and it's just as fast? That's not possible. So we actually did the experiment, and I don't recommend you do this at home, but we ran the experiment of we created, 20 petabytes of data, and then we measured how fast it was accessed, and then we waited 30 days, and we measured as it had moved to Glacier Instant, and we measured it, and there was at most a 5% speed degradation. So it was pretty amazing the results we got. So that's intelligent tiering. And let's see. Still troubleshooting.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Brian. I don't know what happened. It's like a cable got knocked, and I am having a heck of a time figuring out what's going on here.
Tell you what, I have a copy of the presentation. How about I just grab the share?
Perfection. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I'm going to move this up here, and I'm going to get to the right place. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Hold on a second, folks. Intelligent tiering. Okay. And we're going to do slideshow from here. Yay. And oh God. But of course, hold on a second. Multiple monitors. Sorry.
Thanks for your patience, everybody. This was my dilemma. I think an HDMI cable kicked out, and I have a very messy cable situation going on. So Brian's saving the day.
Okay. Are you okay? Yes. Are you seeing these slides?
We are. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well, this is cool because stuff happens. And if and honestly, if you're going to be in the security field, you better be okay with stuff happening, because stuff does happen. I will say our worst security thing that I've ever had happened during Thanksgiving dinner. So, there you go. So we've already, okay, so that's intelligent tiering is a storage class. So you can see here that these are our storage classes. First byte latency. For this first three, it's still milliseconds, then it gets bigger. You can save a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. It is a storage class, blah, 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 blah. And here's the thing, these green lines, in that if you're intelligent tiering, there's no access charge, when you do access it. Okay, so now we can talk about lifecycle transitions, in that you can basically you can programmatically or manually take a file between the various storage classes using a lifecycle transition. And it can be based on the whole bucket, or it can be based on a condition. Now, the interesting thing is, and this is one of these little subtle things, intelligent tiering is based on access time. Lifecycle rules are based on creation time. So if you want to do, so you might, for example, say 30 days after the thing is created, move it manually to a different storage class. Or you could, and whether you access the file or not doesn't matter. If you're using intelligent tiering, whether you access the file or not does matter. One of the interesting things is you can transition from standard to intelligent tiering, but they do not give you an option to transition using a lifecycle from intelligent tiering back to SA. So I suppose that's some sort of lock-in, but I think IT is so much better. Why would you do it anyway? The other thing, the second to last bullet in this slide deck, is that the rules fire at midnight, but there is no SLA on execution time. And so at one point we were talking to Amazon and we said, sorry, Amazon, we have 100 million files we want to move with the lifecycle transition. How long will that take? And Amazon got back to us after a few days and said, we have no earthly idea. If you do it, let us know. So as always, watch out for corner cases. And so I'm actually going to jump around just a little bit and go to actually one more thing for and this is another security measure. So this is actually a set of my buckets in my personal system. Now, can anyone in the chat tell me what's terrible about these names? Or can anyone point out a name that's really terrible? Anyone type, yes, my backup file, or even worse, my Terraform state bucket. And I'm going to change this after this meeting. If you make a name like this, it's easy for you to remember and for your developers to remember. But you might as well, when I named it Terraform state, I might as well have named it, here's my honeypot of data, please steal this because I will be screwed if you succeed. At one of the medical companies, the bucket used to be called, PII rich patient genomic data. And we're like, no. We're going to rename this to X2354, and we're going to have a mapping because it's just asking for trouble. So let's get to object lock. And so we know that ransomware is rampant. And the question is, how bad would it be if all your data was stolen? And in the medical, in most places it's really, really bad, but in medical places people die. So, it's, and I realize I can make this, actually, I don't even know if I need to make it bigger. But so, one of the previous speakers, I forget who said, believe in layered defense. I absolutely believe in layered defense. So you can have service control policies, ACLs, all these kind of things, but, assume, okay, Chris, but assume that people can break into things. Object lock lets you say that nobody, not even an admin, not even Amazon, can get into this. So let's look at the most important thing. So with object lock, there's really sort of two things to pay attention to. One is the retention period. How long are you going to have the thing locked for? And the other is, are you in compliance or governance mode? If you're in governance mode, nobody can delete your file unless they happen to have bypass governance permission, which is not a permission that most people know about, but you can bet that the bad guys know about it. And if you're in compliance mode, no one can take it out of compliance mode, and no one can change the retention period. And here's where you have to be careful, in that we know of a customer, or I'm being vague enough, I have run into a customer at one of my companies where they did object lock for 7 years on 20 petabytes of data. And after they pressed go, they discovered that they had protected the wrong data. They had protected their test data, not their production data. And they had set the retention period for 7 years, and they were in compliance mode. So that poor company is going to pay that bill for 7 years, and there is nothing they can do. There's nothing Amazon can do. They can be admin, root, MFA, nothing. They can't get at it. If you're in this situation, the only thing you can do is delete your account. How catastrophic would that be for your organization to have to delete their account? But I have another customer, I know another customer where they did essentially the same thing, and they're actually deleting their account. And they had to engage a consulting partner to figure out how to move all the data, how to create a new account. Well, yeah, I hope you have a business continuity. Well, yeah, I mean, what they have to do is create a new account. And I think they were in organization, so it's on a whole account structure, and then make a copy of all the data, and then make sure that everyone is repointed everything. And while there is the copy, you're paying even double. And then you delete the account and you discover what you've missed. It's a horror show, just a horror show. So the most important thing I'm going to tell you, because I was trying to convince our company, one of the companies I work for, to do this. Here's how you start. You set up your files in governance mode, and you're not trying to have absolute, ironclad protection. You're testing whether you can do this. Set it in governance mode and set the retention period for a week. Run it for a while. See if anything breaks. See if any of your code explicitly does delete of S3 objects. In point of fact, most people don't do that. Most data, S3 is so cheap, it's like, yeah, if I don't need it, I'll just move it off to another category. But there will be some applications that do want to delete it. So run it in governance mode with a retention of a week for a while. And then maybe set it to compliance mode for a week, or whatever period you can imagine, being able to handle an outage. You could set it to compliance mode for 2 days, okay? And then, if you really messed up, you'd be stuck for 2 days, but you wouldn't be stuck paying 20 petabytes for 7 years. Okay. Now, one of the things you can do is you can, let's see if I go back here. You can do lifecycle transition. So you can transition something. You can basically re-enable object locking. So if you set your files to be object lock in governance mode for 2 days, then you can do a lifecycle transition to keep upping it and keep upping it. And as you get more comfortable, you change it from 2 days, eventually to 3 months or so. I wouldn't make it, bigger than that. Now, if you're doing, and there's all kinds of options in lifecycle transitions, but that's for a whole S3 course. If you have an enormous amount of files, which you almost certainly do, you need a way to find all those files. So you can use inventory and batch to find all these files. It makes, generates a list of matching the patterns. And then you can do various things on those objects. Now, batch has a limited number of verbs that it can do. So you can say, on this list of 1 million files, do these things in batch, but there's only a certain number of things. But one of the things you can do, because Amazon usually does this for us, is you can escape to Lambda. So you could, for a list of 1 million files, run a Lambda on each one. You know, think about what that would be like, and you can transition it. So that's basically it. And I'll just say, and just sort of as a general S3 aside, if you have that amount of files, you probably should be looking at storage lens, which will tell you, you know, how much total data you have, the object count. It'll show you your trends for your object size, and so on. And there's all kinds of metrics you can use. You know, for this, it's like this thing is showing me that I'm doing versions and 2/3 of my file size is occupied by files that are not on the current version. So there's all kinds of things there. And I think that's it. And we can take questions. But so S3 is cool. Object lock is cool. Be careful.
Thanks, Brian. And my God, what a pro, you guys. I gave up troubleshooting. I don't know what happens. It was like my HDMI went out. I could see part of what's on my screen, but part of it's black. So thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. So we've got about 11 minutes left. Trust me, we have things we could chat about with the panel, but does anyone have any questions? And feel free to come off of mute. And by the way, no question is too stupid. So even if you don't know an acronym, please speak up. We've got a wide range of skills and experience here.
Ryan, I had a question actually
Sure.
for you. So I really liked where you pointed out sort of how the naming of an S3 bucket could end up being that could end up being a risk to your organization, just if it's not just the way you name it, if it's too obvious or it's not named correctly. Like, do you have any tips for organizations that, you know, how can you implement security best practices for your organization for people that aren't maybe security minded? Because something like that, where you name something my backup, that could happen to anyone if you're, you know, throughout your workday, you're rushing and not even really thinking about it. It would take a security person to say, this probably isn't a great name for an S3 bucket. So like, what kind of tips did you have to help people implement security best practices for their organizations?
So that would be config. So I would write a config rule that said, you know, when a new bucket is created, you know, tokenize it, and then see if it matches any common dictionary words. And so you can you know, just, and you can do config to react, or you can do config to say, no, you just can't do this. The trick, of course, and is that if you're making the bucket names non-obvious, it should be non-obvious to an outsider, but obvious to an insider. And so there's various ways you can do that. You can do patterns. You know, you can have a cheat sheet someplace that says, you know, incoming genomics is 123.45 or something. But config will prevent config. If there's things you don't want people to do, telling them is part of it, but people are going to ignore that. So use config to enforce it.
Yeah, great advice. Neil, I'm going to pick on you because I know you said you're kind of new to AWS world. Anything that popped up for you, especially coming from, I'm going to say it the right way, Azure?
No, nothing came up specifically, but really, really great presentations. I really, really enjoyed it. I took notes on all of them. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, speaking of the A word, she's yelling at me. Hopefully that doesn't come through. All right, anyone else have any other questions? If not, I know we had some things we thought might be interesting. Yeah, Chris put his LinkedIn there. I will distribute at least how to get in touch with everyone here that spoke today. One thing we were kind of talking about, so Chris, was it a conference you recently went to? You had some interesting info on frameworks and some changes and things like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm always at conferences. That's one of the benefits of my job. But I think one of the things to keep in mind right now, especially with security, is I'm sure everybody heard about the healthcare incident that happened with Change Optum. It impacted claims processing. That impacted pharmacies being able to give somebody their prescriptions, because it would be the pharmacy's liability as to whether or not they were going to get paid, and they don't make the money that you would think they do. This impacted about 70% of claims being processed in the United States. And Change is owned by Optum. Optum is owned by United Health Group. You are talking about a multi-billion, trillion-dollar organization that, with all the security that they had, was not able to fend off this ransomware. Not only that, but they didn't follow the proper processes, and they paid the ransomware. And that is so dangerous on so many levels, because now there's a precedent that the healthcare industry will pay. Anybody in a regulated industry should be afraid, because now when ransomware gangs see that you are paying the ransom, that is a problem. And using strategies that Brian has spoke about, object locking, making things immutable so they can't be changed, is really important for your BCDR, which prevents you from having to pay that ransomware. Everything that Simon spoke about, using GuardDuty, detective, adds to your defense in depth. These are small things that can be done when you don't have a security team. And they're great additions if you do have one. So I think it's just important to realize how big of an event that was, how that's going to impact security for the next few years, and a lesson to make sure everything is backed up. If it's properly backed up, it's an immutable storage, you have a recovery from ransomware that does not include paying.
Right.
And one thing I want to add to that too, Chris, is a thing people don't think about is scanning their backups, right? So someone could deploy ransomware or malware into your environment, they don't detonate it, and they're just going to wait out your retention period. And, it's surprising to me how, companies' retention periods are like 2 weeks. And you're like, you've got to be kidding me, right? So these guys will just wait it out, detonate it, and then if you recover from backup, you're just redetonating the thing.
And you have to look at multiple ways of scanning, right? So you have your traditional signature-based systems,
Right.
But you also want heuristic-based. You want to see behaviors, and again, that goes to that defense in depth. They may have gotten around the signature, but look at this weird network traffic it generated, and it was detected. And if it's detected, you can prevent it.
Yeah, we talked, and Brian, I'll get right back to you. So last month we talked about FinOps. And I said that in my mind, there's this weird Venn diagram with FinOps and security, right? So if you see a spike in utilization and cost on some sort of asset, you should question, is that a security risk or is that just a FinOps problem, right? But Brian, you were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, a couple of points. I was doing some consulting for a company, and they said, well, we don't need Amazon security because we have two of the best security folks. And I said, well, that's lovely. Amazon has 2,000 of the best security folks, so you're not gonna beat that. We had another customer who was doing really sensitive data, and they said, what are you doing for us in terms of security? And I said, Macy, detective, GuardDuty, inspector, config. I said, this is table stakes. Should be just a given. The other thing I'll say is backups are great. How many people test their backups? How many people have ever done a test restore? The answer is essentially 0. And to Chris's horror story, I'll say, I heard another horror story about a company that got ransomed. They paid the ransom, did not then make any changes. They got their data back, but they didn't do any changes. The bad guys came back in a month later and said, guess what? We ransomed you again because it made it so easy. And it's like, oh my God.
Wow.
And you have to question it when someone pays the ransomware, your data has been stolen at that point. Right. So all the data is compromised. You're paying the backup because you didn't follow your proper backup procedures. You are missing something, like your source code, for example. You don't pay that money unless you really need something back, because you're not going to spend, in this case, it was $20 million, I believe it was, because you lost, a backup that for a system that can be rebuilt for under 100,000. You lost your source code, that you lost a lot more. So having the proper processes in place really protects you from situations like this.
Yeah, we've got 2 more minutes. Real quickly, I just wanted to touch on this. When we got together to kind of run through everything, without the technical difficulties, of course, we talked about social engineering, right? Like, all these systems are phenomenal. You should certainly have them in place, but how important training is, and the MGA, I think the root cause in that ended up being social engineering, right? Somebody got their password reset and off to the races.
And that is why you always put MFA in place. Add to that. There was actually the breach for Log4j, I believe it was. I want to say that was SolarWinds. And that was detected because an employee got a MFA request when they were on vacation. And they reported it immediately. Whereas some people may have MFA fatigue and just, okay, and click it. So that came down to just a simple having the backup mechanism and a process to be able to report that.
Chris, there's a question in chat if that's the incident you're talking about. Thank you, Smeet.
Yes, that is the incident. So I've been deep in that because I'm in healthcare for about a month now. And I've spoken with CISOs at all the major healthcare companies, and it's big. There are a lot of changes I think are going to be happening. And it's really odd that it's not being talked about more. And a lot of us are saying that this is probably one of the biggest attacks on our infrastructure we've ever seen. But the only thing we can think of is not being talked about because it's a US healthcare giant and it's an election year. The story should have far more traction than it has now. We were talking about hospitals not being able to prescribe medicine, the VA being one of them.
Right. And the one last thing I'll toss out there is, because I'm the person that my whole family comes to for these things, I tell all my family, every email is a scam, every phone call is a scam, especially if someone calls you up and says that they're in fraud prevention. They are not in fraud prevention, they are in fraud generation. I mean, I had a friend recently said, oh, got a pop up on the screen saying, oh, your system is being taken over, let us help you. And
Now
I
it
said,
is.
unless it's me, don't let them in.
Yeah. Amen. Well, thanks, everybody. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you to our speakers. An incredible amount of work goes into this. So appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge. I think next month we're going to talk about resiliency. I think there's still enough here, talk about the front end of keep them out, but how do you recover, right? Which is hopefully no one ever has to do. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Please follow us on the meetup group and on LinkedIn and connect up with everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.